Good evening. Great to be learning with you on a Monday, Yom Sheni. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Sharon in New Jersey, Stephen in New Hampshire, Bill in mid-Missouri, Ryan in Florida, Karen in Northern California, Paul in the Great Northwest, Shandor in the Bronx, Lucy in Minnesota, John in Maine, Marjorie in Virginia, Aoife in Florida, Yitzhak in Minnesota, Marie in Freeport. Welcome, everybody. We are on Daf Mem Vav, page 46, here in Tractate Gittin, the 19th volume of the Talmud. We're in chapter 10, today discussing Mishna number 10 and 11. And in this tractate on the laws of divorce, today we're finally going to talk about divorce. We've been on such an extended digression in this chapter, keyed off of these certain rabbinic decrees that were created for tikkun ha-olam, for the betterment of the world. Decrees that would, would satisfy policy objectives that would make society function better. And we're actually going to get to some decrees now that have to do with divorce, starting with this Mishna number 10 in chapter 4. Let's do it. A man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation. So you can see how this tractate now follows after tractate Sota, right? What would be a bad reputation? The Sota became a Sota if her husband warned her not to seclude herself with a particular man that she had reason to be jealous of, and then she secluded herself with that man, and both the warning and the subsequent seclusion were witnessed by a pair of witnesses. Then she would become a sota, and the husband and wife would be prohibited to each other until she drank the waters of bitterness, right? The test, the ordeal. That was some water with some dirt from the floor of the temple and the ink of some verses on which this law of the sota was written in the Torah. And if she was innocent, nothing would happen to her. And then the husband and wife would become permitted to each other again. So this is not some kind of besmirching of the reputation that rises to that level, but if for whatever reason, he had heard rumors, it wasn't witnessed, it wasn't proven, but she's flirting, who knows what else was going on. So if he claims, now remember, a husband can divorce his wife for any number of reasons, but if he says that the reason he's divorcing his wife is because she has developed a bad reputation, then if he later changes his mind, he may not remarry her, right? So he should be, in other words, he should not be leveling that accusation at his wife lightly. He better be sure that that's what he wants to do, and this is the way that he wants to proceed. And the sages will explain why when we get to the Gemara. But again, a man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation, i.e., he had heard that she committed adultery, he may not remarry her, even if it becomes clear that she did not, in fact, commit adultery. And similarly, and remember, when can people remarry? They can remarry if after they were divorced, she didn't go and marry someone else and then divorce that guy, right? If she had marital relations with any other person while she was divorced from him, then he can't remarry her. But if that had not happened, it would be permissible to remarry, unless the reason given for that original divorce was her bad reputation. Or there's other reasons. Now, regarding this law, that if he said, and similarly, if one divorces his wife due to a vow that she took, and he could not live with her under the conditions of her vow, right? Like she said, I hereby vow that I will never have sex with my husband. Right, so now, unless that vow can be dissolved, now a husband can dissolve his wife's vows, but if she took it in such a way that it couldn't be dissolved, well, that would render their marriage untenable. So if he divorced her and the reason given was such a vow that she took, again, he would not be permitted to remarry her. if conditions change. Now, Rabbi Yehuda says if he divorces her due to any vow that the public was aware of, then he may not remarry her. But if he divorces her due to a vow that the public was not aware of, he may remarry her. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Meir says, if he divorces her due to any vow that requires investigation and dissolution by a halachic authority, he may not remarry her. But if he divorces her due to a vow that does not require investigation and dissolution by a halachic authority and is dissolved even without that, then he may remarry her. Now remember that under Jewish law, a woman has a leniency that men do not, right? If a man vows a vow, so the only way that he can get out of that vow is to go to a competent halakhic authority, right? A rabbi who's expert in vows, who questions him and investigates the situation and creates an opening like, if you had known what the consequences of your vow would be, would you have made that vow? No, I would not. Then usually the vow can be dissolved, but not always, as we shall see. So he can only get that vow dissolved by finding such a rabbi who's willing to dissolve it after the questioning. However, a wife who makes a vow has an additional way out of her vow, which is that her husband can dissolve her vow for her, or if she's a minor living in her father's house, her father can dissolve the vow for her. But there are limitations to that leniency. He has to do it on the day that he hears of it. If he waits after that more than a day, then they lose that opportunity, and there's other limitations as well. Yes, so we just said that. He may remarry her. Now, Rabbi Lazar said they prohibited him from remarrying her in this case, where she stated a vow that requires dissolution by a halakhic authority, only due to that case, where she stated a vow that does not require dissolution by a halakhic authority. And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said there was an incident in Tzaidan involving one man who said to his wife, it is konam, i.e. it is forbidden like an offering, if I do not divorce you. And he divorced her. And the sages permitted him to remarry her for the betterment of the world. So, vows, as we'll see today in today's daf, generally speaking, we should not take vows, right? Because a vow creates a new reality that no one forced you to create, right? So, for example, God said, let's say about the Jewish people, you can eat cows that are properly slaughtered, you can eat sheep that are properly slaughtered, you can eat fruit, you can eat bread, all these things that you can eat. God said those things are permitted to you. If you go and say, I'm just as for a teaching example, obviously I don't mean it, but if a person said, I hereby vow that such and such produce or food stuff or meat or something like that is prohibited to me, okay, well then you're going to have to live by your vow, and you would have rendered prohibited something that God said was permitted. Who do you think you are? Right? And often people will when they make a vow, it's because they speak in a moment of emotion, of anger. And the sages, as we'll see, passed laws and created the conditions. Vows are spelled out in the Torah, so it is permitted to take a vow, but it is strongly discouraged because it could lead to transgressions of your vow, which are outright sins that you would not have committed had you not taken that vow. All right, let's get into it. So the Gemara about Mishnah number 10. Right, so when the husband in the incident, usually the incidents are given in the Gemara, this one was even in the Mishnah, and the husband said, he was so angry at his wife, he basically said that, this food or all food, some kind of strong vow is going to be konam to me. So konam means just as if I, took this apple and said it is hereby consecrated, right? Meaning it is given to the temple or is given to a priest. And therefore I will not be able to eat it anymore. It's no longer mine. I have given it to God, or I have given it to the priests who represent God or who work in the temple, etc. So at that moment that it's consecrated, it was permitted to me before. Once I consecrated it, it became prohibited to me. That's when you make something consecrated. You can say something is konam, meaning it's going to have the same relationship to me as if it were consecrated. So it's not consecrated, but nevertheless, so somebody else can eat it who's not a priest because it isn't consecrated. But as far as I'm concerned, it's equally prohibited to me as if it had been consecrated. So when this husband said, something like, all food is konam to me unless I divorce you, okay, he has to divorce her or he's going to starve to death. But really, maybe he didn't think that through. He didn't really want to be divorced from her. It was just a moment of anger. And so the sages said, even though this involved a vow, they're going to permit him to remarry, and so this exception to their earlier decree was for tikkun ha-olam. Now, the Gemara, Rav Yosef bar Minyumi says that Rav Nachman says, and the law stated in our Mishna, which says that in certain cases a man who divorces his wife may not remarry her, is only applicable when he said to her explicitly, I am removing you from the house due to your bad reputation, or I am removing you from the house due to a vow. He stated that that's the reason he's divorcing her. If he didn't make that statement, even though that was his motivation, but he didn't say it out loud, then if he later changes his mind, he can remarry her. But when he made that statement out loud, presumably in front of witnesses, so now it becomes a different thing, as we'll see, because it could cause harm to her. This decree of the sages is actually going to protect the wife. Now the Gemara explains that Rav Nachman holds, and we're at the top of 46a, what is the reason that he is prohibited from remarrying her? This is due to potential harm caused to the wife. If the husband would wish to remarry her after she had married someone else, right? He divorced her and he said it was because of her bad reputation. It didn't stop her from finding a new husband. She got married again and she had kids with the second husband. So if the first husband would wish to remarry her after she had married someone else, he may cast aspersions on the validity of the get, the bill of divorce, by claiming that he gave it under a false impression. He said, I'm divorcing you due to your bad reputation. He could later come and say, somebody whispered in my ear that you had a bad reputation, but that person was a liar. He was an Iago, like in Othello. And I never would have divorced you had I known that these were just lies being whispered into my ear by this gossip bearer. Now, when he says that the divorce was given in error, that could create doubt about the validity of that divorce. If that divorce was in doubt, and she remarried a second husband based on the validity of the divorce from the first husband, and then she had kids with the second husband. So that second marriage was not a marriage. They were committing adultery, and the children of that union would be mamzers, a disastrous result. That's why the sages said, if this guy gave a reason for why he's divorcing her, an explicit reason, and then later he comes and says, no, that reason was false, that creates this big problem, and that's why they decreed, if he gave a reason for divorcing her, that it was her bad reputation, or because of a vow that she took or that he took, then he is not permitted to remarry her. And everybody better think twice before they rush into a divorce on those kinds of terms. Right, so this is due to potential harm caused to her if he would wish to remarry her after she had married someone else. He may cast aspersions on the validity of the get by claiming that he gave it under a false impression, and this may lead to her child from the second marriage being considered a mamzer. Therefore, if he said to her at the time of the divorce that this is the reason he is divorcing her, then he will be able to cause this harm to her. But if he did not state that this is explicit, if he did not state explicitly at the time of the divorce that it was due to bad reputation or a vow, then he won't be able to cause this type of harm to her because his claim would be disregarded. There are those who say a different version of Rav Yosef bar Minyumi's statement. Rav Yosef bar Minyumi said that Rav Nachman said the husband must say to his wife, be aware that I'm removing you from the house due to your bad reputation, or be aware that I'm removing you from the house due to a vow. The Gemara explains that Rav Nachman holds, what is the reason that he is prohibited from remarrying her? So that Jewish women will not be promiscuous with regard to forbidden sexual relations, meaning that they won't put themselves in situations where they might acquire a bad reputation. Or they won't, nor will they be, or it is so that they won't, in terms of vows, it is so that they won't become lax with regard to the law of vows. The sages penalized these women who acted improperly by instituting that if they were divorced due to their own actions, taking vows, or acting in a way that creates a bad reputation, then they cannot return to their husbands. Therefore, therefore he must say this to her, be aware. It will therefore serve as a warning for other women. Now the Gemara comments, it is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the first version of Rav Yosef bar Minyumi's statement, citing Rav Nachman, and is taught another baraisa in accordance with the latter version, right? Which is the reason why the sages instituted that one who says this, that I'm divorcing you due to bad reputation, or I'm divorcing you due to a vow, may not remarry. What is the policy reason? We have two views. It is taught in a baraisa in accordance with the first version. Rabbi Meir said, for what reason did they say that a man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation may not remarry her? And one who divorces his wife due to a vow may not remarry her? What is the reason? Perhaps she will go and marry another man, and later the matter will be found to have been fabricated, i.e. he will find that the rumor was false, or that it was possible to dissolve the vow. And he will say, if I would have known that the rumor was false, or that I had the power to dissolve that vow, then even if they would have given me 100 times 100 dinars to divorce her, I would not have divorced her. And the bill of divorce would then be found to be void, and her children from her second husband will be considered mamzers. Therefore, one says to him from the outset, be aware that a man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation may not remarry her, and one who divorces his wife due to a vow may not remarry her, right? So to protect the wife and the children of a potential second marriage. That's one reason. Here's a baraisa that says the different reason. It is taught in a baraisa in the Tosefta 3:4 in accordance with the other version. Rabbi Lazar, the son of Rabbi Yosef, said, for what reason did they say that a man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation may not remarry her, and one who divorces his wife due to a vow may not remarry her? Why? So that Jewish women will not be licentious with regard to forbidden sexual relations or lax with regard to vows. Therefore, in order to publicize this matter, one says to him upon divorcing his wife, you say to her, be aware that I'm removing you from the house due to your bad reputation, or I'm removing you from the house due to a vow. And then she will know what happened, and other women will hear. Right? So one view is that it's to protect women, and the other view is that it is to warn women not to behave that way. Now the Mishna taught that Rabbi Yehuda says if he divorced her due to any vow, that the public was aware. Right? So far we've said that if the husband if he divorces her because she has a bad reputation, and he says so at the time of the divorce, then he cannot remarry her. And if he says at the time of the divorce, I'm divorcing you because of a vow. Now, this could be a vow that she took or a vow that he took, but the reason for the divorce is the vow that one of them took. And he said that at the time of the divorce, then they may not remarry. So now we're going to get a little deeper into, well, what about vows? Vows are very complex matters. So what kind of a vow? It's going to be a limitation. Right? If it was a private vow, it's not going to have the same outcome as a public vow. The Mishnah taught that Rabbi Yehuda says if he divorced her due to any vow that the public was aware of, he may not remarry her. But But if he divorced her due to a vow that the public was not aware of, then he may remarry her. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, what is the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Based on what does he make the distinction of whether the public is aware of the vow or not? As it is written in the Torah portion describing the interaction of the Jews with the people of Gittin during the wars of conquest when Joshua led the children of Israel into the promised land. Joshua 9:18, and the children of Israel did not strike them, for the leaders of the congregation swore to them. This teaches that a vow taken in the presence of the public cannot be dissolved. In this case as well, if she took an oath that is known by the public, it cannot be dissolved. And the rabbis who hold that such a vow can also be dissolved respond to this claim in the following manner. Did the oath take effect with regard to them at all? Since the people of Gibeon said to them, we came from a far country, and they did not come from a far country, the oath did not take effect with regard to the Jewish people at all, as it was taken under false pretenses. And this, that the Jewish people did not kill the Gibeonites, like they did to the other nations who resided in the land of Canaan, despite the fact that the vow did not take effect, was due to the sanctity of God's name. If they would have killed them, they would have desecrated God's name by not fulfilling their word, although this vow did not take effect. So the Gemara asks, and how many people constitute the public? Now that we're talking about vows that are public are different than vows that are private, how many members of the public need to know about a vow to consider it a public vow? Rav Nachman says 3 people. Rabbi Yitzchak says 10 people. And the Gemara explains their opinions. Rav Nachman says 3 constitutes known by the public. And he derives this from a verse written with regard to a zava. Right? So a zava is a woman who has a menstrual discharge outside the normal times of her period. And the verse states, and if a woman has an issue of her blood for many days, yamim, rabim, many days, Leviticus 15:25, and Rav Nachman holds that days are a minimum of 2. So the addition of the word many indicates that it means 3 days. Here too, where the Mishna uses the word many, rabim, it is a minimum of 3 people. Rabbi Yitzchak says the law that a vow taken in the presence of the public cannot be dissolved is referring to a vow taken in the presence of at least 10 people, as it is written in the Torah portion discussing the people of Gibeon, which is the source for this law. For the leaders of the congregation swore to them, and a congregation consists of at least 10 people. Of at least 10 people. And how do we know that? Wait a minute. Of at least 10 people, as it is written in the Torah portion, for the leaders of the congregation swore to them, and a congregation consists of at least 10 people. And how do we know that? From the 10 spies that were sent into the land by Moses. The Mishnah taught that Rabbi Meir says if he divorced her due to any vow that requires investigation and dissolution by a halakhic authority, he may not remarry her. However, if he divorced her due to a vow that does not require investigation and dissolution by a halakhic authority, he may remarry her. And it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Elazar says they prohibited him from remarrying her in the case where she stated a vow that requires dissolution by a halakhic authority, only due to a case where she stated a vow that does not require dissolution by halakhic authority. The Gemara asks, with regard to what principle do Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar disagree? And the Gemara explains, Rabbi Meir holds a man desires, meaning he does not mind, that his wife should be disgraced in court, even though her vow would necessitate dissolution by a halakhic authority. The husband may still claim that had he known that it could be dissolved, he would not have divorced her. However, with regard to a vow that did not require dissolution by a halakhic authority, but could have been nullified by the husband himself, he would not be deemed credible to state that he was not aware that he had the ability to nullify his wife's vow. In such a case, if he were to claim that the divorce was in error, we would disregard his claim. And Rabbi Elazar holds a man does not desire that his wife should be disgraced in court, right? He doesn't want to air out his dirty laundry. He doesn't want to bring his wife to a rabbi to dissolve his wife's vow. Therefore, if he were to claim that had he known that her vow could have been dissolved by a halakhic authority, he would not have divorced her. If he claims that had he known that his wife's vow could have been divorced by a halakhic authority, we disregard his claim because he wouldn't have used that ability anyway, right? Because husbands don't do that, according to Rabbi Elazar. He is, however, deemed credible if he were to state that he did not know that he had the ability to nullify the vow himself. Therefore, in the case of a vow that does not require dissolution by halakhic authority, the sages instituted that he would not be permitted to remarry her, lest he bring the validity of the divorce into question, as explained earlier. Rabbi Elazar also holds that once the sages instituted this ordinance with regard to vows that do not require dissolution by halakhic authority, they applied this ordinance with regard to vows that do require dissolution by halakhic authority as well. Right? We'll often see that where they have a policy reason to eliminate a particular condition, they might also eliminate a similar condition lest the public become confused. Rabbi Yosei, son of Rabbi Yehuda, said, there was an incident in Sidon involving one man who said to his wife, it is konam, right? Prohibited to me as if it were consecrated. It is konam if I do not divorce you. And he divorced her. We don't know what he vowed would be konam to him, but it doesn't matter because he took a vow. It is konam if I do not divorce you. I'm sorry. No. What just happened? Right. So there was this incident in Sidon, right? Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said there was an incident in Sidon involving one man who said to his wife, it is konam if I do not divorce you. And he divorced her. And the sages permitted him to remarry her for the betterment of the world, tikkun ha-olam. What did the Mishnah teach that causes Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, to teach this incident? Why are we learning this incident? The Mishnah had just discussed a case where the man took a vow, and it relates an incident where the man took a vow, right? In this case, they let the man remarry, but normally we don't. It makes sense to include this. So the Gemara answers, the Mishnah is incomplete, and this is what it is actually teaching. In what case is this statement said? When she took a vow, since he may not remarry her in that case. However, if he took the vow, he may remarry her. And Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said there was also an incident in Sidon involving one man that said to his wife, it is konam if I do not divorce you, and he divorced her, and the sages permitted him to remarry her for the betterment of the world. Now, the Gemara discusses the formulation of the vow that this husband took. What is meant by the expression konam, as stated by the husband? Generally, this term is used when stating a vow of consecration. How does such a vow render his wife forbidden to him? And Rav Huna said that the case is when he says, all the produce that is in the world will become forbidden to me if I do not divorce you. He just said, I will starve to death if I don't divorce you, so I have to do it. Now, the Mishnah taught, and they permitted him to remarry her. And so the Gemara asks, well, it is obvious that this is the case, as why shouldn't he be able to remarry her? And the Gemara answers that, lest you say, let us institute a decree due to the statement of Rabbi Nassan. As it is taught in our Baraisa, that Rabbi Nassan said, and we are on 46b, one who vows, it is as if he built an altar. This is important language, key words, right? When the Talmud says you did something, it is as if you built an altar. Meaning, the Torah says in the clearest and strongest possible terms, when you enter the land, the promised land, you shall bring your sacrifices to the place that God will make known to you. So this was the tabernacle that they built in the wilderness. And then that was the place for the first 400 years that the children of Israel lived in the Holy Land. And then when Solomon built the first temple, that became the place where they brought sacrifices. And now that God has told you through his representatives on earth, where the sacrifices are brought, no individual shall build his own altar and bring his own sacrifices on it. And this is actually a very important core teaching in Judaism, that you don't pick and choose your Judaism. You don't make Judaism in your own image. You don't, create the version of Judaism that you like, right? And which violates the precepts of Judaism as it's been inherited by us, right? So the people who are, building an altar and bringing personal sacrifices on it, seems like they want a connection with God. They're making sacrifices. They're sacrificing animals that were dearly expensive to them. Isn't that good? No, because the Torah says that is not the law of the sacrifice, and that is not how you shall bring sacrifices. So when the Talmud says that is like building a personal altar, they're saying that is like committing a grave sin. And what are they likening? Building a personal altar and committing that grave sin. What are they likening that to? Vows. Uttering vows, right? So it's very interesting, right? That the Torah says you can utter a vow. And when a person utters a vow, they shall be held to it. But because uttering a vow creates this very difficult situation where, especially if you spoke it in anger, you might, create a condition on yourself that you're so likely to violate and then come to be a sinner. So the sages said, don't do it. Uttering a vow is like building a personal altar. Rabbi Nassim said, one who vows, it is as if he built a personal altar during the time of that the temple stood, when it became prohibited to build a personal altar to God outside the temple. And one who fulfills his vow, it is as if he sacrificed an offering on his personal altar, thereby doubling his sin. Well, once he made the vow, doesn't he have to fulfill it? No. Once he makes the vow, he should go to a competent halakhic authority who will investigate the matter and find an exit for him so that he doesn't have to fulfill the vow. This is understood with regard to vows of negation, right? Like, I vow I will not eat that food that is permitted to me. I will not, sleep with my wife, God forbid, something like that, where you render prohibited something that was permitted to you. You should have that vow dissolved. However, if a person vowed that he would consecrate some part of his property and donate it for the upkeep of the temple, then we don't insist. He shouldn't have made the vow. He can plan to do that. He can sort of pledge without making a vow. He shouldn't have made a vow. But if he makes that kind of a vow, then he should fulfill it, as opposed to rendering something that was permitted into something prohibited. He should have that vow dissolved, rather than double down, which is like bringing your sacrifice on the altar that you built as a personal altar. Therefore, it would be possible to suggest that the husband is penalized and prohibited from remarrying her because he sinned by taking a vow and fulfilling it. Therefore, this teaches us that that is not the case in this example. So the end of the Mishnah stated that the reason for this law was for tikkun ha-olam, for the betterment of the world. So the Gemara asks, what betterment of the world is there in allowing him to remarry her, right? He vowed that all the produce in the world would be konam to him if he does not divorce her, so he divorced her. What tikkun ha-olam is there in permitting this man to remarry her? Didn't we say that if he divorced her and said it's due to a vow, that he may not remarry her? Well, then we said, well, if it's her vow, and he says that it's because of her vow, then he may not remarry her, but perhaps if it's his own vow, he may. But that's according to one view. According to the view that any vow will lead to, it's prohibited to remarry. So why did the sages make an exception and say for tikkun ha-olam, we'll let this guy remarry? Rav Sheshes said, this statement refers back to the first clause of our Mishnah. The expression for the betterment of the world is not an explanation of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda's statement, but rather it is meant to explain why there is a penalty that one may not remarry a woman whom he divorced due to her bad reputation or due to a vow that she had taken. Not it is for tikkun ha-olam that we let this guy remarry. No, it is for tikkun ha-olam that we generally don't allow these couples to remarry, where he said he divorced her due to her bad reputation or due to a vow. And Ravina said, actually, this expression applies to the latter clause of the Mishnah. And this is what it means. This is not for the betterment of the world. This is not for the betterment of the world. In other words, when they instituted that he may not remarry her for the betterment of the world, it is only with regard to a case where the woman has taken a vow. However, when the husband takes a vow, there is no element of tikkun ha-olam, and he is permitted to remarry her in that case. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 10. Here's Mishnah number 11, still about divorce. So we're back to our subject. Mishnah number 11, and it's a short Mishnah and a fairly short Gemara. So if you've got questions or comments, start to get them in. With regard to one who divorces his wife because she is a sexually underdeveloped woman who is incapable of bearing children. That's known as an alonus, right? An alonus is somebody who it turned out was sterile, since a husband has an obligation to reproduce. Right? Women don't have that obligation. They don't have to have children, but men are obligated to have children. So if you marry, and you're only, and you know, once it became the law that you can only have one wife, so if you found that you had a wife who's incapable of bearing children, that would be a reason to divorce her so that he can marry someone with whom he can have children. So if he divorces his wife because she is an alonus, meaning that after their marriage, it became clear that she was an alonus. He didn't know that when he married her. Rabbi Yehuda says, since he said he's divorcing her because she's an alonus, he may not remarry her. But the majority of the rabbis say he may remarry her. He may not remarry if he said the reason I'm divorcing you is because you have a bad reputation or because of a vow. But if he says I'm divorcing you because you're an alonus, and then he changed his mind later, he may remarry her. If after he divorced her, this alleged alonus married another man, and then she had children by him, meaning that she was not actually an alonus, and she is demanding payment of her ketubah from her first husband, claiming that he unlawfully divorced her without paying her marriage contract, as he claimed that she was an alonus and their marriage was a mistaken transaction, Rabbi Yehuda says that the husband may say to her, your silence is preferable to your speech, meaning preferable for you. What does this mean? It is preferable for the wife to withdraw her claim. If she persists, he may say that he divorced her only because he believed her to be an alonus, casting aspersions on the validity of the divorce, which would create a problem for her second marriage and the children of that second marriage. Therefore, it would be wise for her to withdraw her claim. She remarried. She doesn't have to go chasing the ketubah from the first husband. It might create problems for her in her second marriage. Better she should go on and be happy with her second marriage. Here's the Gemara. The Gemara clarifies the dispute in the Mishnah. Is this to say that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about potential harm, i.e. harm that she may later incur if she casts aspersions on the validity of the divorce, and therefore rules that the husband may not remarry her, ensuring that he will divorce her only if he is absolutely certain that he wishes to do so? And the rabbis are not concerned about potential harm when they say that the guy may remarry if he divorced due to, by saying it was due to her being an alonus. But didn't we learn that they each said the opposite? Meaning Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis who disagreed with him. As we learned in the previous Mishnah, Mishnah number 10 here in chapter 4, a man who divorces his wife due to her bad reputation may not remarry her. And if one divorces his wife due to a vow that she stated, and he could not live with her under the conditions of her vow, so he may not remarry her. Rabbi Yehuda says if he divorced her due to any vow that the public was aware of, he may not remarry her. But if he divorced her due to a vow that the public was not aware of, he may remarry her. So apparently the rabbis are concerned about potential harm to her, and consequently they do not make a distinction between one vow and another. And Rabbi Yehuda is not concerned about potential harm, and he makes a distinction between a vow that may lead to permissiveness and one that does not. Shmuel said, reverse the opinions in this Mishnah. Rather say that it is Rabbi Yehuda who says that he may remarry her, and he is not concerned about potential harm, while the rabbis say he may not remarry her, and they are concerned about potential harm. But the Gemara challenges this understanding. Reverse the opinions. Let us not be so drastic. But from the fact that it teaches in the last clause of the Mishnah, if after he divorced her, this Alonus married another man and had children from him, and she is demanding marriage of her marriage contract from her first husband, Rabbi Yehuda said that the first husband may say to her, your silence is preferable to your speech. And one can learn by inference that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about potential harm. And the Gemara answers here to reverse the opinions. Abaye said, no, actually, do not reverse the opinions and say that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned about potential harm. The distinction is that in that Mishnah, which discussed a woman who took a vow, Rabbi Yehuda holds in one matter in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and he holds in another matter in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. In the case of a vow that requires dissolution by halakhic authority, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar that there is no concern about potential harm in such a case, as a husband would not desire that his wife be disgraced before the court. And in the case of a vow that does not require dissolution by halakhic authority, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who maintains that the husband would not be deemed credible if he were to state that he was unaware that he could nullify her vow. Rava said, Is it difficult to reconcile the statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah? But it is not difficult to reconcile the statement of the rabbis in the Mishnah with the statement of the rabbis in the previous Mishnah? Abaye only addressed how to explain the contradiction between the statements of Rabbi Yehuda. Rather, Rava said, it is not difficult to reconcile the statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda in the previous Mishnah, as we answered. And additionally, it is also not difficult to reconcile the statement of the rabbis in this Mishnah with the statement of the rabbis in the previous Mishnah. As who are the rabbis in this Mishnah? It is Rabbi Meir, who said we require a compound condition stipulating both positive and negative outcomes. And with what are we dealing here? We are dealing with a situation where he did not compound his condition, as he stated only that he is divorcing her because she is an Alonus. But he did not state that he would not divorce her if she were not an Alonus. Therefore, his condition is disregarded and he may remarry her. And I'll just say, what is a compound condition? We learn that out from the tribes of Gad and Reuben, when the children of Israel were poised to enter the promised land after the 40 years of wandering in the desert. The tribes of Gad and Reuben said, you know what? We have big cattle herds. We have big families. The land that we're standing in now to the east of the Jordan River, this is perfect for us. We'd like to just stay here, make this part of Israel too. And Moses said, are you insane? What's the matter with you? After all these 40 years, we're about to enter the promised land and you want to, claim this land that's not in the promised land as your tribal inheritance? And they said, but it's good for us, but it's not like we're separating ourselves from the people. We understand that the whole people is about to enter the promised land and that we're going to have to fight wars, the conquest of the promised land. But we're not going to sit idly by and let our brothers go fight that war just because we get this piece of land peacefully. Rather, we will go and fight with them, and we'll even fight in the front. And Moses said, if you will go and fight with us and even fight in the front, then you can keep this piece of land as your ancestral portion. But if you do not go with us and fight in the front, then you will not receive this portion. And from that story, we learn that the way we should enter into agreements with people that include conditions, if you will do such and such, then I will do such and such. You should also state, I believe it's the contrapositive, And if you do not do such and such, then I will not do such and such. And that's proper law of contracts under Jewish law where conditions are included. Okay, that's what we've got for today. Let's take a couple of quick questions. Load. Ifa. Divorcing a wife due to a bad reputation, which is later disproved, is a massive betrayal of her that he trusted gossip over her. They should stay divorced for her sake. Just so. Just so. Remember that divorce is a messy and undesirable outcome, and that traditional communities, it's rare. Sometimes divorce is necessary. For various reasons, divorce is necessary. But the sages are generally going to build up structures that discourage divorce. Find a way to make it work. Don't jump to that negative outcome. And if you must get a divorce, it better be for the right reasons. And this is not a good reason. Yitzchak, how many children is a man obligated to have? 2. We follow Beis Hillel in this. So a Jewish man is obligated to have at least a boy and a girl. Beis Shammai said 2 boys, but the law is a boy and a girl. Now, there are many people who are unable to fulfill this obligation, but they're supposed to keep trying if it's at all possible for them. But if, for example, you marry, and it turns out that you're unable to with your wife, in modern times, I don't know that becomes a reason for divorce, right? Where it turns out that she can't have and he can, consult a rabbi about that. But women are not obligated to have children because childbirth is dangerous. Men are, and there's mitigating circumstances. That's just a general principle. We're not going to get into the nuances and the exceptions of that law right now. Bill, if a man discovers his wife is infertile, is he considered to be fulfilling his obligations to reproduce if he remains with his wife? That's exactly what you started to talk about. Citing Abraham and Sarah conceiving despite Sarah's supposed infertility. Or is that considered relying on a miracle, which is not permitted? All of which is to say, is a man obligated to divorce an infertile wife if he has no children in the modern era? He's certainly permitted to divorce her for that reason. Is he obligated? I think that's one of those things. I can't remember the law offhand. So any answer that I give is probably wrong. And I'm not a rabbi, and I'm certainly not a poskening rabbi. I can't remember. But my recollection is that this is one of those situations where the rabbis will carve out so many openings where even if you are obligated, you won't really be obligated. Because, what a terrible situation to force a couple that is in love, and who could adopt, to go a different route, right? So I don't know what the law is. But my impression is, no, he's not going to be obligated to divorce her. Bell, since women are not obligated to bear children, why should a wife being an alonist be a reason for the husband to divorce her unless there was deception at the onset? Right. So he would say that he, betrothed and married her with the understanding that he was marrying a fertile woman. If she knew that she wasn't, that would be deception. If she didn't know and then it turned out that way, you could say it's still like a mistaken betrothal. But, that would be in terms of like undoing the marriage, almost like an annulment, right? Like a mistaken betrothal as opposed to a divorce, which is a different path out of the marriage. But as I said, I don't know if he's obligated. The question is he permitted? Couples get divorced over lots of different things. Let us pray that nobody gets divorced unnecessarily, and that people marry for the sake of shared values, which so infinitely increases their odds of having a successful marriage. More than anything else, shared values leads to successful marriages. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. With God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow on the 4th of July to learn a beautiful daf, page 47 here in track